Someone's got it.
I have no idea. I have no idea where that's going. So
Okay.
whether we can find it afterwards will be interesting.
So in Polk County, as I said, we made the decision to go all the way into Pro with the new branch versioning and everything else. We decided we wanted to keep things consistent, so we talked a lot about how we wanted to set it up from the beginning. We wanted consistent naming convention. We wanted it similar to what we used to do in Polk County, just because we kind of built our own history. You know, we built something similar to records before we were in Fabric. And so we came up with all of our naming conventions, and then Dean built several customized tools for many things, but one of them was a tool that builds what we call our transaction, which is on more of the back end for our GIS to keep track and manage. We have the version that is named the same as the transaction. And then inside the version, we can potentially have multiple records, but we tried to match it up so that one version is matched up with one, what we call transactions in our A&T system to help just kind of keep things clean. And that way it's all kind of one thought all at once. I've found there are times that I do multiple transactions in a version because they're either on top or adjacent things going on in the map, and just to help clean up conflicts in versioning, it's just easier to keep those all together if they're all done at the same time. But generally, we try not to keep versions too long, so we keep one version per transaction.
Do you mean version and record, are those two different things?
Yes, a version's tied to a person or owner, and inside that version, it's almost kind of like a copy of a map per se. But in that version, you can have multiple records. And a version is essentially kind of like a copy of the default at the time you take it out, and then you can play with it and you can add as many records, do what you want in it, and then you're able to reconcile, which brings updates up from default, and then post, which then takes your copy and puts it back into default. Does that make
So
sense?
we're talking branch versioning at this point.
Yes,
Yeah.
this is inside the branch versioning.
So that versioning is way different than any versioning we've done before.
It's not all that different from traditional versioning.
Okay.
Okay. Think of in a traditional version, we only have one level. So
Yeah.
in traditional version, you can have kind of trees. We don't have any trees. We just have one version for, and we made the decision, Christy, I'll just jump in because then I can bridge. We decided that a version name and a record name were going to be the same. We just wanted it that way for clarity. And what we wanted is that and essentially becomes the parent transaction. So I got a plat. So I give the version, we follow our naming conventions, our version gets basically the name that includes the plat name, as does our record. And that way we just make sure that when we're looking at the list of possible transactions, you can find your record quickly. That your record name. Now, when you're doing a transaction, i.e. when you're processing the information, you may create several records. Sometimes records, for example, could be a deed followed by a survey, or you're working on a small area and you find you have a lot of other things that have you want to process other records, like other deeds or other surveys, to make your map better. They can all be also included in that transaction, but we would identify each one of those as a record following the whole ArcPro Parcel Fabric structure.
Okay.
And I know different counties do things differently. At Polk County, we are very detailed. We like to keep track of every intermittent step as we go along. And so even like a lot line adjustment, we will create a new tax lot for the transfer piece. And then, we may combine it into the parent, we may not, depending on different things, but we like to keep track of all those small pieces. So for instance, earlier this year, I got a partition plat that had a two-way, both, tax lots had a lot line adjustment with each other, and then the plat happened on one of those final lots. I ended up with 3 records in that one. So it just depends on what you're doing, how you want to do it. And workflows, like I say, are different places. You might choose to do it all in one record. Even ESRI says, hey, probably just stick to one version for that. You don't want versions to live too long. It can cause complications with conflicts down the road if you don't get them back into default relatively quickly.
Okay, because I think currently, like, I have a version and Jeff has his version, and we do our work in it, and then we reconcile, or we reconcile at the end of the day, basically. But so this process is throughout the day, depending on how many records we have, or how many partitions or whatever, there's a version for each one. So we create a version and then reconcile when we're done. Validate.
That's, Gabe, that's what Polk County does. You
Okay.
do not have to do that.
Yeah.
That is our workflow. Frankly, drives me crazy. But we've been doing it since 1995.
It's also ESRI
Yeah.
suggests that you keep approximately one version per, approximately one record, it depends, but basically they suggest that you don't hold on to one ongoing version. We did the same thing when I was at Marion County, where we just had a version per person, and you just reconcile and post as you go along. Polk County, how our workflow works, it doesn't work the same way. A lot of times we're working through something, then we find, oh, nope, we need to send a letter, they need to re-record something. Things can sit for months, so we do a version per transaction.
And then can you go back into that version later?
Yes, it's very simple to change your versions. The versions exist until you delete them.
Christy, do you want to just click on the So
Yeah.
you can see in the left-hand side under map, can you guys see the screen okay?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
So under map, you can see that she has got a PW Pontier, and it says, I can't read it because I don't have my glasses on.
This is
Christie
a
test
named
map index.
version.
So
Yeah.
can you just right click on it, Christy?
Oh, right. So you can change the versioning there.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Sorry.
So
Yeah.
it just says
And
change version.
as
Noted
we
all
say,
right.
we have a lot of versions right now. There's also these nice filtering things, so I can filter by the owner of the version. Or I can also filter by, names. We put the tax slot or the map tax slot in as part of the name essentially. So if I do the T.08, I guess it's not working there, but if I do it elsewhere, it will show up.
Maybe because
As
you're filtering on Christy only.
Yeah.
probably, if I got rid of this.
I
it might
did
be
like
okay.
those Dean RIP ones.
There's all sorts of tests versions, yeah. We have all the above, like I say, and our inspector is part of our workflow. We do the initial building of the record, but to essentially work it into the map, we leave that as a separate step, and that is done by inspector, who then reviews everything before posting into default. So right now inspector has most of them because just how our workflow's gone. A lot of these have been worked, they've been finalized in our A&T system, but have not been moved into default yet.
So, and then do you do the QT stuff?
Yeah, we chose to kind of do it at that level, just with training and everything else. It's just, we felt worked better to kind of build in some extra permission safeguards and just set up a structure so that there's a, like I say, a user that is doing the reviews. Technically, it's a username password. Anyone could do it, but at least it kind of separates it out. helps keep us focused.
I'm
Gabe,
sorry.
we
I'm
just
a
have-
little I'm a little confused on the A&T or the side of it. So is there a direct connection to your Orion? I assume you're using Orion,
We use Helion.
Helion. So
We're
is
using
there
ORCATs. So this is tracking, and the information that we generate as part of this goes into a voucher process. So in fact, we have a process that produces files that get directly imported in. And so we like to tie everything
Better.
together.
Yeah, and somewhere here, section name.
does it-
Dean, would it be showing here where the ID number,
Is-
No, it's probably,
RA transaction ID? Oh, that's right, everything's so new. We
Yep.
have this column here that's called RA transaction ID. And we actually do, in our process of building our initial record, put in our transaction ID from our A&T system to help make that connection if we want to in the future.
that's the primary code, primary key, I guess is.
Yeah,
Okay. So do we do anything like that, Gabe, at this point?
No, we don't. The only thing that would be. No, we don't. The deed number would be the closest thing we have to something like that. But we do not have transaction IDs in Orion to tie in this way, like this, no.
and we store the deed number in source.
mhm,
And that's a record that you guys have, that's a field that you guys have as well.
yeah.
So
Could that be an account number field, I wonder? Wouldn't that,
we would,
No,
no, we
not a
wouldn't,
record.
yeah,
The problem with account number is over the years, you're going to do a lot with that account. And so if you're trying to track back what that particular
Oh,
version
right.
is, you need to
Okay.
track it back to the source.
gotcha, okay.
And Gabe and Jeff, you guys don't have to make an inspector. I mean, at Polk County, we have Christie, and then we have 2 brand new cartographers that are learning. So we felt it was a good idea to have the inspector, so then she can just do the QA/QC and check it all out before she puts back in.
And over time, there may be other people who use Inspector. I may not be the only one long-term.
Mm.
We just thought while we're building the structure, we'd kind of make these different areas that just kind of help build the roles, and that way it's there if we need to use them. So, like I say, we added a lot of fields just to kind of keep track of different things, because at Polk County, we do choose to keep track of a lot. It does not mean that that's a needed thing. But because of that, and because we decided we wanted to kind of come up with unique naming conventions for our versions and records and everything else, Dean has built a tool so that we end up with this, township. There's a township number, then we only have 1-digit ranges here, so just 1 digit for a range, underscore. Then we'll have the section quarter if it exists. If not, there's underscores. And then we came up with a naming convention for the different types of work we'd be doing with those tax lots inside of those map tax lots, so that hopefully every record will end up with a unique name over time. So, all right, if you guys are ready, I'll show you Dean's tool that builds essentially the transaction for the GIS side of tracking, the version that knows that it's tied to the owner at the time, and then also builds our record name.
So as she's getting this loaded up, basically what you normally do is you create a version. And
Yeah.
then once you've got the create version, you create a record in that version. But because we wanted to follow these rules and make sure we were consistent between our version and our record, I just wrote a menu interface and then it creates the version, and then it also creates the record within it. So you only have to do things once.
And it helps remind us what fields that we want to fill out. So yeah, normally you could, if you just go to this source tab, you click on your version name, and then there's a versioning tab. You can always do new version this way. There's manage versions which again is another way to look at the versions. From here, I can change the owner. I can change the name of the version. There's some different things going on there. But because we chose to do this different, instead of doing new version this way, and then from here, create record this way, we use Dean's tool.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah,
And,
so we, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think for us, Gabe and Jeff, unless we decide we want to do it differently, so each version will basically be your name, and then if you're gonna have multiple, we'll have to figure out a naming convention on that.
And
Okay,
again, some of it's workflow, because we'll start something and it may sit for several months. When I was at Marion County, our workflow was you take something on and you work it through. Our philosophy there was generally, as long as you can figure out the intent, you work it through and you do it. In Polk County, we tend to send a few more letters to say, hey, you need to re-record this because there's issues with the document. So if you generally are able to just pick up the deed and work it all through in a day or two, and you don't work on multiple records, different ones at different times, you might be able to not have something nearly as complicated as this.
yeah, that's typically how we work.
Yeah.
So we don't have things sitting typically.
Yeah. And so, like I say, ESRI suggests not to use the same version long term, but what you do is you just go here, and then once you click on this, it brings up the versioning tab, and you can click new version, you make your version. And then from there, you can go here and create your record, and then move forward and work it through. And then once you reconcile and post, you can just delete out your version, and then you're ready to start on your new next one, and it will keep it a lot simpler.
And Gabe and Jeff, the process she's describing of holding these, that literally started in 1995, and it's held through, Christie is my third lead cartographer, and it's just a business process that fits with how Polk County works.
Yeah.
Okay,
So I'm going to go ahead and use Dean's create transaction tool. Like I say, most people don't need anything quite this complicated, but it works with what we built decades ago. So here I can either type or do the drop down to get my map number. I'm in 28. A lot of times I'll just do this to make sure I don't get any weird spaces in it. My name is going to be PT1.
And version names can't have special characters. So this tool, if you put a dash, versions can't have a dash, it replaces them with underscores, just some basic little stuff.
And
There's that Helian ID.
yeah, here's the Helian ID, just so that we can refer it back to our A&T system, just because we do like to track this stuff. And then here's our source. Normally I put a BOR, but for this one, we have reasons we're not working the deed. I'm just going to stick with the survey number to make it easy. But if you did the DR, we also keep track of what type it is. Did it come from the clerk's office? Since I've decided I'm going to call this the survey, I'm going to work through with the survey information instead of the record information.
so this create transaction is different than creating a record. This sets up the create record and the
Now,
version.
this actually does the create record as well as create the version.
It does all of it at once for us, and it fills in a lot of the data where we need it for us.
So do we have this tool right now,
You
Dean?
don't, but when you create a record, so let's say that you created a version that was Gabe today,
Yeah,
then you wanted to create a record within this,
yeah,
you can enter all these same attributes with almost the same form in ArcPro Fabric.
just with on the create record.
On the create record, this is virtually the same data.
Okay,
It's just to make sure, because versions have a very limited amount of attributes you can have. So we just want to make sure that most of these attributes are going right into the record.
okay.
So like I say, we have a lot of fields. They're not all required, but for our purposes, we thought a lot of pieces. And we want the comments field in general if we need to make comments, but we also, as part of our business process, always kept track of the perimeter closure of our thing. And so it's also a place for us to put our closure information.
Okay. And the plat name, that would be, is a subdivision or partition plat number or?
Yes, and we built that in. A lot of the reason is so that it gets put into the system, and then Dean built us some tasks that then you could just click and say, yep, create the subdivision name, and it knows to pull it from the attributes.
So we have multiple maps, we have multiple layouts, so this is all just ensuring that the transaction is created and that all of the various data layers and all the various maps that are required for this particular workflow are being done. And that's what's all flipping over on the left-hand side.
So this is just taking everything on, looks like tax lot 701 and 702 and creating a version out of that. Is that right?
So this is creating a version. It's going to be called, yeah, whatever that transaction name is, it called a version. And once it's done here, and again, we have lots of maps for different reasons, lots of layouts for different reasons. This is just going through and updating so that all of the data is pointing at the correct version, and now it's populating. So now the record has been created.
Yeah.
We just have to select it.
So at this point, we don't have an active record, but like I said, the tool's already created. And if you look over here, it's all organized, but here is actually my new version that was created. There's the version name that will match our record. And I might just go ahead and head over to this window just to make things a little cleaner, what we're used to seeing. Okay, and then I'm going to go to manage records. Let me go back. So when you go to the manage records, you get this choice, different ways to do it, especially if you work through things very quickly and cleanly. It's really easy to just go to the records created in the last 7 days. It makes it easy to filter and find your record. And then you just click on your little thing and it will make that your active record.
And Christy, could you just quick hit the hamburger there and bring up the properties for that particular record?
Sorry, I don't usually bring up properties this way.
Yeah, I know.
How do you?
But it just says record properties, just click it. One down.
One down, thank you.
That's the same data that you would have entered in, and you can see it's all populated. So thank you, Christy.
Yeah, so right now I'm.
How'd you do that? So you selected that record, you manage records?
I
Yeah.
just went to this little 3 thing, and then down here is record
No, I understand that, but
properties.
how'd you activate this record?
Yes, manage records.
Record, and
It will
then,
take you to this screen, especially if you guys go through your workflows very quickly. I'd recommend using the records created in the last 7 days, because if you click on that filter, chances are you're going to see, well, if you're saving to default quickly, it might still show too many, but there are ways to sort. You can sort ascending, descending, so it will show your newest on top.
Okay.
And then you find your record you just created, and you just have to click this to make the active. Yeah, or in my case, deactivated it.
set active.
So when I created this Zoom meeting, just real quick, it was to last an hour, but Christy and I have been on for a long time before you guys came. So if we disappear, I'm going to create a new one and email it. I just don't want us to blow up and everybody said, well, I guess they're done talking. So
I apologize, Dean. I should have let you get off earlier.
oh, no. It should be totally fine. I just don't know. So,
Well, this is set to go till 3 this afternoon, right?
perfect.
Okay, so now we are in our active record. One thing, I have some extra layers that Dean doesn't have in our default, so by doing it, it bumped me out. So I'm going to quickly repair my data source and my control because I will want to use that. Comes up.
So we have been moving data around, and so what we've got is different SDE databases for things that don't get updated very often. And as we're implementing those, some of those go in and some of them I have to move back in later. And I gotta, things I gotta work on. No one told me corners needed to be added.
And it's not corners, it's control.
Sorry,
I would have said the same thing. Is it corners?
I
Is
had all my glasses on.
the so do you keep all this on one server, one enterprise server?
You know
Like-
that, Dean?
We have how the enterprise server is set up with the various SDE databases. I can't answer that. That would be an Eric question, but we have 3 SDE databases
Oh, okay. Yeah,
And-
just curious.
and they get used for different things.
Gotcha.
Actually, we have 4, but for cartography, we have 3.
Okay. And again, let me know what you care to see or not to. Generally, at this point, we go straight into the traverse and start doing it. This particular one, my call to my place of beginning actually has it so that I have a call from a DLC up here down to this point right here, which we also have control for. So we wouldn't normally in Polk County start with the ground grid correction, but on this one I would potentially, because I have enough data up front. Would you guys like to see that, or would you rather skip that step?
I would like to see it. We would like to see it.
Okay,
Gabe wants to see everything.
Yeah, I do.
yeah. I like to see it, if whether or not I'd ever use it, yeah.
Yeah.
So let me go ahead and I need to remember which piece it is then. There. If I have multiple control, I want to make sure I grab the right one. It's here somewhere. Just give me a minute as I figure out if I need my Shelton or my Brown DLC.
But all of this, all of her things like she's gonna do with Traverse and so forth, they are just standard ArcPro tools. However, because she has the record activated, the features she's going to add from now on are gonna the line features she's gonna add with Traverse and the like are all going to go into and be associated with this record. So Traverse the same, taxlot lines is the same. All that ArcPro Fabric is adding, the fabric piece is adding, is that connection of what you're entering to the record. That's it.
One thing I will add is in Polk County, again, this is a choice we made. We wanted our non-fabric feature classes to also track with the record. And so one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to select my record and run a tool Dean's done that's called assign record on, assign record ID on. And what this does is it just allows that since I have or whatever non-fabric layers I create will also get the record ID tied to it so that for our purposes, it's all kind of connected. So I'm going to go ahead and run that.
And she has stepped off the ORMAP tools committee, big
Yes.
time there.
I didn't actually see select a record, so
I did this and I hit select record here.
oh, so you're not like you're not selecting one in the map itself.
My record has been created, but there's no geometry for it yet. So
Gotcha.
there isn't a way I could select it on the map.
Okay, now I'm it's slightly less clear than mud.
Okay.
We we made the decision that all of the annotation and the features that you add to build the record, you know, all the annotation, reference lines and so forth, we just wanted them labeled to be
Yeah.
as part of that record.
And so now that I've ran that tool, if I go to Traverse, which is under the parcel record workflows, I have different choices, but because this is going to be a call to my place of beginning, it's what we would have traditionally used construction lines for. But if you want it to be created in the fabric, you can use connection lines for it. I'm
And that's
still
what connection lines are for.
yeah, this type of thing. So first thing I'm going to do, because I'm going to set my grounded grid, which is basically going to do my rotation for me since I have those 2 control points, is I'm going to just click this little thing down here, this grounded grid corrections. It looks kind of like a little N with a little angle.
Okay.
You see that? Okay.
I've done this actually.
And I'm trying to get it to. I can turn it on. Good. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to enter the ground and draw the grid line. So what that does is now from my deed, I'm finding the call that is going to be, that's going to be 0, 10, 31 southwest. And the direction is 3731.23. So that's
tool always down there at the bottom, or did you put it there?
I've always had it here by default, so I do think it's by
It's always
default
there.
down there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's always there.
Whoops, and I've lost it again. There we go. I'm going to have to re-enter it. It's just okay, it's still there. So now I'm going to just go ahead and hit next. And it says click the start point of the grid line. So my start point is actually going to be this right here. And don't mind me, we have multiple years of control. I'm just going to click the one that I want it to be, which is that one. And then I'm going to go down to my other point.
I can never do this part right. Cool. Good job, Christy.
And you can set your snapping to those
Yes.
controls.
Before
right?
I did this, I changed my snapping so that it will only do control and taxlot line just to help avoid, you know,
Yeah.
some extra things that may or may not go. So I'm going to go ahead and click this one. And when I do that, how do I get it to pop up there, Dean? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
Okay, normally I can also see it up above, but this now shows my direction offset and my distance and my scaling that is set because of how I put those in. And so now when I COGO it, it should be all lined up without having to rotate later.
And you typically do this with every transaction, I guess is what we're calling it. Every record.
In Polk County, we rarely do it because I only feel comfortable doing it if I have the control to base it off of. If you want it to just match with your map, yes, it's a great way to go.
But that's per record is what I'm trying to get at.
You
That-
can leave it turned on, but you probably want to reset it per record because every record usually has a slightly different rotation and scaling.
And just an
there-
FYI, I just checked our order map, and yeah, when you click on parcel record workflows, that ground to grid tool is there.
Gabe, in olden days, back in the ArcInfo days when you all were in, you know, kindergarten or whatever, Tom and I at that time decided that we would have a ground to grid conversion in ArcInfo for every township. And so no matter where you were, if you started in a particular tile, which was basically a township map, it would automatically set the ground to grid. And we did that for, I don't know, a good 10 plus years. And over time, the next cartographer said, no, that's implying things that are not clear. And so we took it off.
Okay.
So it's kind of fun to see that it's back, but actually into something that can be worked with. We just flat out set it.
And so at this point, basically my place of beginning, I know exactly where it's at. My call, I don't necessarily need it, but I can go ahead and build it. And like I say, you can build it into connection lines and then it's already part of your fabric. Again, it's just our choice of workflow. We're still using construction lines. So then I'm just re-entering that stuff just to kind of show that it should match now that I did that ground to grid. If I had not done it, there would have been a rotation when I did this.
And if they had found their place of beginning, Christy, and were comfortable with that,
You
they
don't
wouldn't have
have-
to do any of this. They
It
could
all
just find your,
depends, yeah, on your business process. And it's a little slow sometimes. Hopefully eventually get there. There we go. Did I type something in wrong? I can't even tell you what happened there. Even what map I ended up on.
this is a standard ORMAP tool that you guys have.
Yeah. So somehow must have clicked off. I'm not sure what happened, but we will reset our starting point.
Chrissy,
Mm-hmm.
all those purple points. are actually
You're
control points.
muted.
Oh, sorry.
Christy, sorry. All those purple points are control. Is
GPS control.
that correct?
Yeah, they're GPS control.
Because yeah, I'm jealous. I don't have a fraction of that to work with.
We don't everywhere. When I worked in GIS, that was part of my job, was to gather control to do the control mapping.
Right. Yeah, that sure would make things nice. Have to go hunting it down and looking for things in order to tie into.
You could do an ORMAP grant and you too could do what Christy did, which was get a GPS device and a shovel and she would go out and look for them.
I would love it. Get outside a little bit.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that was,
I thought that was Chris's. Isn't that what Chris and Jason, what's his name? Jess do over in survey?
Peter does our control right now.
Oh,
Our
so we
survey.
actually, as part of our remapping, had ORMAP pay for a lot of that work.
I'd love to get out of the office some more.
It's great when it's nice out.
I'm not quite sure, but for some reason this number looks very off. I think somehow I got my ground to grid stuff off.
And Christy, you could just turn that off and jump to Traverse. I think we got
Yeah,
the idea.
but let's see here. Yeah, I'll go ahead and just turn it off so we won't see the rotation happen. We'll have to rotate later ourselves. I'm not sure why it
Yeah,
had
and
the
that's
issues.
why it was going so crazy is that
Yeah, somehow it
grid
got
was-
way off.
was sending you off to Never Never Land.
Mhm. So as you can see, since I don't have ground to grid, it's not going to match up. It's going to rotate quite a ways off. I'm not sure I'm even going to go ahead and build this line because yeah, in this case, I'd rather just start at my place of beginning. But I could go ahead and finish by hitting this or new or even back, and it would create. Instead, I think I'm just going to delete.
This is
not
just
worry
me
about it.
doing basic editing, but can you not just, when it's highlighted like that, just turn on edit vertices and fix it that way? Or is that not working what you guys do?
We may do that when the line is finished, at that point, it's co-going, probably wouldn't do it during the middle of a traverse. It would be
Gotcha. Okay.
future. And I do use that when we still prefer to do our editing with the lines instead of the polygons. And so I do use edit vertices and insert or intersect and a lot of those tools at that stage. So instead, I'm going to say this is my place of beginning, which I need to make sure I got the control.
Now, are you in construction lines, Christy?
I am still in construction lines. I will want to change this to our tax lot lines. So. And to save time, unless you really want to see me battle with the traverse, because I do tend to make a lot more mistakes on presentations than on my own, but I saved an export of the traverse, so I can go ahead and import the file. Go ahead and do that. So yeah, if you get stopped in the middle, or if you have one that just for some reason isn't clean, you think I'm going to take a 10-minute break and come back to it, you can save it and come back to it. Just like in ArcMap, or if you have ones from ArcMap, you can pull them in.
Oh,
So-
that's interesting.
Yeah, so here's my traverse stuff. So you can see I have a curve here. Curves, we put in the bearing. The chord length is our choice. If you do arc length, that's here, that's a choice, and you can set these up by default. And there's the radius. If it would have been a left instead of a right turn, you would have done a -15 instead of a +15. But that way, and again, since I don't have the grounded grid, you can see the rotation is off. But it does show, if it's over 1 to 100,000 ratio, it'll just show high accuracy. It shows the misclosed distance. You can sometimes see a little more accuracy if you go over to the closure tab. You also can change it from compass to other types from here. And here it will show your residual values, your adjusted, so you can see all those pieces that you kind of saw before in ArcMap, if you're interested in seeing it. You also can set your tolerance if you want something different for the front. So like right now, ESRI has it set for 1 foot. You can actually play with this and change it if you want.
This might be getting away into the weeds, but are you guys in this situation with what's going on in cartography? Are you now converting over to international miles and feet and stuff like that, since it's
No.
considered more accurate? Okay, just
We
wondering.
haven't changed our base GIS, coordinates and all that. I figure we're waiting for DOR to make that change, correct, Dean? Is it?
Yeah, and we've done that twice now in the last 25 years, and going through all the databases everywhere and all the historical data to make sure we don't lose anything.
Oh, yeah.
I'm so glad that the next time they do that, I'll be at the beach or
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Christy, did you click on the hamburger before to
Oops.
pop that?
Sorry. Oh, to get to closure tolerance, I clicked on it.
The hamburger, okay.
But if you want to see the more detail, you actually click on the closure tab.
Yeah, I got that
And
part,
that's
and I wasn't sure where you clicked to get
Yeah.
hamburger
So-
and then closure tolerance.
Yeah, and it's also where you go to export or import a traverse file.
Okay, cool.
And if you had a really bad closure, but you still wanted to force it, this is also where you could say to force the closure.
That's how we do things in Josephine County, just force it,
When all else fails, just force it.
just force
Yeah.
it, just hit it harder with a hammer, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
So at this point, I have my perimeter. If we want to just kind of make things easier and probably, I know some counties for their initial build, they used to build off the county and then just place it later. I don't know your guys' way of doing things, but if you want to get rid of some of the busyness, you can hit show only active.
Mm.
And that's going to get rid of all of your fabric features other than what's in your record. And then we built a special tool since we track the the non-fabric stuff to the record, I can also filter only active on for non-fabric and really just clean it up. So all I'm seeing is my stuff, and I can see control because it's not something that Dean knew to filter because he doesn't have it in his map. I added on my own.
Oh, okay. I was wondering, looking at that, how in the heck you see what you just did, but there. now we know.
That show active is in the record, parcel record workflow tab. Is that where that-
Yes, so
You are?
partial record workflows show only active.
Okay.
And that's for the fabric features.
Oh yeah, it's on our ORMAP right now. It's grayed out, but I assume once we get Parcel Fabric in there, it'll show up.
Well, it's grayed out whenever you don't have an active record.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, if I turn this off, now it's grayed out and you can see everything.
Gotcha. Okay.
But because I had it on when I changed that, it's still on and it went right back to it.
Okay.
So that Kogo was the boundaries based on the bearing and distance of this survey, correct? That we loaded?
Yeah.
That's what the base-
Yep, this is the, I did not have the ground to grid because for some reason I got that messed up. Like I say, it's not something we generally use, but it can be a useful tool, and had it set earlier when I was testing, no problem. I'm not sure what I did wrong, but I don't use it a lot.
So if you didn't use the ground to grid, you would just go to the start from the point of beginning, which you assume is a good point, and Kogo from that point.
However, yeah, your guys's workflow works. If you if you base it off of your map and it says, hey, start at the northwest corner of that tax lot, great, start there. Yeah. Let me see. Okay, at this point, we would then do our interior lines. Assume it's probably similar for you guys too. I'm going to go back to the traverse tool. Still set to tax lot lines. I'm going to go ahead and set it. My start point. I also traditionally, I used to not worry about when I set a closing point. Now I like to, before I start the traverse, because if things are close, it can actually snap to the end of what you are Kogoing instead of what's already been Kogoed, where in ArcMap that wasn't true. So
How
I
did you
always,
know where your start and end were like
I
that?
use snapping
For what though? Like how would
to the tax lot lines because I had
based
when
on
I
a Kogo?
Kogoed,
Okay.
because I Kogoed those earlier that you did the perimeter. Now I'm working on interior lines.
Okay.
So I only have a few places where it breaks, so it's fairly easy to find them.
Because you don't have the original break, so to speak. I understand. I'm following.
When she
Oh,
traversed
so
in,
oh, go ahead, Dean.
when she traversed it in, she made individual lines, not
Okay.
Kogoing the entire distance. And then her snapping is both to vertices and to endpoints. And so as you're sliding along, it tells you what it's going to snap to.
In
If
this
you-
instance, how simple this is, why would you not just draw the line? Why would you traverse it in? Just asking.
We always do in Polk County. We
Does that
just
be-
try to keep
does
track
that-
of everything.
So does that, by doing the Kogo, does that put the attributes on the line?
The
rather-
attributes will be, yes.
So if you just drew it, those attributes wouldn't be on there?
Yeah, it wouldn't know unless you entered them in.
Okay.
So you could draw it and then use the tool to calc Kogo, update Kogo attribute. The problem is when you do it that way, it's going to be what was its best shot at a inverse. And that may not be there. So it's faster. We've decided it's faster just to Kogo it in. Plus you check and make sure the surveyor is correct, because sometimes, like often, they're not correct. And this way we can make sure, and our surveyor often doesn't, they look at the whole document and make sure it meets spec. But if they're, if the bearing and distance on the dock is just slightly off because the folks use AutoCAD and then inversed, and it's not exact for what it feels, this way we find it, because you know, all you need is that not matching the record when someone's complaining about their taxes, and then you have to explain why it's off, and then they think you're a liar, and
Okay.
you know, it's hard to explain it when your direction is off by a tiny amount. But if they're angry, then this avoids that issue. We just make sure it matches.
But you're right, you can snap point to point, fill it in off the map and quickly double check to make sure it matches. We just have found for us, we're less likely to make mistakes this way and we know better
Right.
what's going on.
Which is probably better, but that's why, you know, our processes aren't always the best, so.
Well,
You,
there's.
you could
all
also
kinds.
just drag the line and type it in.
Mhm. Yeah, so now
We
I'm,
could just
this-
update the attribute if we did it that way.
yeah, so
Okay.
like right here, you know, this one I cogoed in, I could see my closure was, you know, pretty good, whatever. But a new, if I wanted to, I could set my start point for this one. And then I could set my closing. And I could just decide to draw it in. I'm not, you know, I think like that. And it puts it in, and as you can see, it puts the little brackets on it that kind of shows, hey, this is a computer calced amount. But it would allow me to look at it and I could go, oh, yeah, that's not right. I want this to be 229.99, and this one is supposed to be 8128. This one's supposed to be 39, I mean 41 instead of 39. So yeah, I could manually update it like this,
Oh,
but
that's a great idea. I hadn't
Yeah.
thought about that. That's way better than the attribute update.
so there
Yeah.
are different ways that you can do it. And this way I still get to see, okay, I have a 0.01 accuracy on it.
But if you had just done the traverse, it would have given you the same thing. Okay,
Yes,
The end result of these two efforts is exactly the same, correct?
yeah,
same steps, there's no, okay.
yeah. So then those are now drawn in.
And then those, what we typed in is what's gonna get stored on
Yeah.
the attribute for that line.
Yeah, so now, since I have my show only active turned on, if I open my tax lot lines table, it's only going to show me the tax lot lines related to this record. That's all that's even here. So it's very quick and easy to see what, you know, is actually in for the direction. In this case, the arc length, because that was the curve or the distance. So
And
it
that's-
records those.
And that's because we're still in show only active mode.
That's why we only see these lines,
Yeah.
correct?
Okay.
Yes, if I unclick that,
Then you get everything.
then all of a sudden instead of 14, I have over 2,000.
Yeah, okay, gotcha.
I will warn you, if you leave this table open, sometimes you see weird things happen with the map when you're trying to run things. So we generally try not to leave tables open, but they are useful.
Mhm.
Let me see. Okay. So again, with Fabric, at this point, normally what we would do is we'd go ahead and build the polygons. And to do that, again, we're on the parcel workflows tab. We hit create seeds.
Would you need to clear that selected line down there on the bottom left?
Not for doing this, but I
Okay.
can.
I just you wouldn't end up with a weird kernel that way.
You shouldn't, no.
Okay.
So then I'm going to hit the create seeds. And it's also kind of a nice check that, oh, look, I have 3 seeds. I expected 3 tax lots. So I know my lines must be fairly clean, that it actually worked. And then once we have done those seeds, we can normally just will hit build, but just so you can see it, there's a build active and build extent. It will go to build active automatically, and that's what we want. At Polk County, I'm not sure when we would use build extent, but depending on how you do your working it with the map, you may, you know, use it. We're very line based here, so we'll stick with the build active.
It looks like if you're show only active mode, then you get both. If you're don't have show only active, then you get the build extent.
You can always choose whichever one. Build extent, you'd have a hard, I don't think it would really work without turning off the show only active, because then all you're seeing is your active, but
Yeah.
yeah, you would not want to build extent without this rotated, because then you are going to end up with all these sliver polygons because of the rotation. So just kind of a heads up. There's, depending on which routes you pick, there's always things to be aware of. So at this point, I can select everything, because again, I kind of built my workflow with the grounded grid, so I wouldn't have to rotate. But if I select the record, let me make sure that my record. I'm going to make sure everything's selectable, hopefully, and then editable, because I'm going to be rotating it all. So select the record. I'm going to also select all my features in my active record, because not only do I have lines and polygons, but it also builds points. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to want to rotate. So I go to the parcel record workflows.
Sorry, where did you click for select all records?
This
In the hamburger.
right here. So there's the select records is here, and then further up is the select all features in active record. And I went over and I clicked the all, because I want it all. If there were connection lines created, it gets them, points, lines, polygons, assuming that you have all your layers in your map editable, selectable, and on display. So then, yeah, when I went to under the parcel record workflows tab, I just clicked the rotate tool, comes up here. There's other ways to get there as well. I'm going to hold down control so I can move my center of my rotation. And right now it says it's snap into taxlot lines. I'm hoping to make sure I get it on must be on my control. That's why I can't see it. So I made sure that I put it on my point I wanted. I'm going to turn the show on the active back off. And now I'm going to want to rotate it to my map. So since I have snapping turned on taxlot lines, I can just with the mouse click and grab this to rotate and snap to my map. You know, like everything else, play with it. Make sure you kind of know how things work and what you need to have on off.
That rotate with the shortcuts when it works, because I remember which button to hit. It's amazing. But when you get which button to work, it's sure annoying.
Yeah. So then when you feel that you have it rotated the right place, you can just click this finish button and it will move it to that, and it should move everything. And it looks like it did not move my record, which means I probably don't have, yep, I did not make my record editable. So it did not move with it. So now if I go clear, select record, rotate, I'm now going to have to move my record separate because I did not check and make sure that it was editable at the time.
So is it going to true north because of why is it going to true north and not to your, whatever your magnetic declination is up there in the Portland area?
Because we didn't turn on the grounded grid.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if I had gotten that set up correctly, which was
Gotcha.
my plan for this, it would have been
Okay.
perfect. Yeah.
Gotcha. So when the surveyor record or whatever you're using was done to true north, is that essentially what's happening
Yeah.
here? Okay.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it had enough information to do the grounded grid.
Gotcha.
And that doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
Well, there's
Okay.
rumor we had a surveyor down here that liked to drink in the morning. So back in the day, back in the old days. So
I had done a project down in the Benton County, and for whatever reason, a surveyor for 40 years always entered the north-south incorrectly, but the east-west was always good. So good historical record because he did a lot of stuff, but you had to be aware. So where are you at, Christy?
So one of the things that we'll do usually at this point is we will update our tax lot numbers. Several ways you can do it. You might even, for when there's so few, a lot of times I just select them and work through the attribute table to make things easy in this new attribute pane. If you right click on the main title of the grouping, you can say select only these, and it only selects the tax lots. Then I can easily just go through and say, okay, select this, and I know that one needs to be 702. We actually use the tax lot field to keep track of this for ORMAP purposes in our own. ESRI usually defaults to name to do this stuff, and I can type things in. The other thing you could do, like on a subdivision, is they do have a sequential numbering tool. And if you bring this up, you can choose your layer, in which case right now I'm on tax lot. You can choose your field. I would be filling out tax lot. Find it. Oh, I'm gonna be close. There it is. Format number. So like if it was a parcel, you could put in parcel space, if that's how you like did your lots, things like that. Or if you have a tax lot number that has something like county name first, you could put it in there. Start value, in our case, this would be like 700, increment by 1, and then you could click on the map and do it. Unfortunately, I have 700, then it's going to be 702, then 701, so I wouldn't use this tool. But if I had, it would go here. I can just double click when I'm done, and it numbers them all.
Huh.
And when it's done running, when it's done running, it usually shows what the next start value would be. So in this case, I would expect to see 703 because it's already ran the first 3, and then I know I could start again if I wanted to and keep going with that. But for my purposes, I just want to number them. So this one is 700. This one's actually supposed to be 702. And this one's supposed to be, you always have to apply your changes. This one is 701.
And what you can see, Gabe and Justin, is that Gabe and Jeff, the attribute rules are updating the OR tax lot, the OR map number and all that, and the map number and the map tax lot. And that's the same as what you guys have.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
And again, there are many different ways once you have everything placed to work into your map. I probably would do annotation before I work things into the map. That's our normal way of doing it. We have tools we use, again, that is usually kind of our go-to to create things. So again, I'm going to turn show only active off, and I'm going to select my record, select everything in my record. And I am going to run, Dean, is this a tool they have, the add dim anno, or is that just
Yes, they have a very
okay.
similar tool. It's not the same as ours, but it's virtually, they don't have the same layers for each layer, plus they have a whole lot more.
Mhm.
So for example, level 22 might be in one and 28 in another.
Yeah.
And so but it manages all that, same tool.
So we use this tool here. that's right, because map index is now on that. I'm going to turn my filter only active off. And now I'm going to go to this add dim anno feature labels. And it blew up on me, Dean. I have no idea why.
I have no idea.
I don't know. I haven't saved my records, but that shouldn't cause it to blow up.
Were you in edit mode?
I'm always in edit mode, but I hadn't saved edits.
If you hadn't saved edit, it's
Oh, yeah, it's probably.
that's my story and I'm sticking with it.
Okay, well, usually it just tells me in the tool.
Yeah, frankly, I can't really see what's on the screen, so
Perfect.
There you go, yeah.
Okay,
I'm just waiting for things to blow up.
so by selecting my tax lots ahead of time, or in the lines, it knows how many lines I have. It selects my map. I have a drop down so I can choose if there's multiple maps it hits. So you choose your map that you want your bearing and distance anno to be created in, and then you hit run.
And you cross your fingers. Because demos are always when things blow up.
Mhm.
I haven't changed this application for months. So if it dies, I think it's operator error, Christie.
The things are a little bit more. There's some
Oops, looks like
extra
So
complications
what it's
because of our
doing
map
is,
index
is
changes.
when it's doing this, the first thing it does is it labels all features in the map extent. It just turns labeling on. So, and that labeling is Gabe and Jeff, that label meets your labeling specification. It may not meet Polk County's labeling specification. So Christy and Zach went through and they created labels with the correct size, the correct spacing, and all that good stuff to annotate. So that may be something we look at a little bit more.
And so if we want to see the ones that were created, I can go ahead and turn Dean's filter only active back on.
Oh, that's nice, yeah.
So
Yeah,
again, this is that tool that because she had the tool on that assigned it to the record, it did it. And so that's why you're not seeing the other stuff, but you're seeing this annotation. It just
Mhm.
seems a little cleaner to work with. It has some downsides, but you get
yeah. And so, yeah, so then I have annotation that I can then move and play with. I have different options. There's also a tool. They also have the add taxlot anno for mount labels.
and I don't know if they have actually
Okay.
have that as an ORMAP tool, but
I'm probably not going to use it for something like this anyway. I find it very useful for subdivisions. For something simple like this, if I turn my filter only active back off, you would see I already have tax lot numbers for 701 and 700 in the map. A lot of times I prefer to just grab them and assign them to my record instead of creating new and having to delete out the old. And then I only have to create annotation for 702. There's different ways to do it. But if I go ahead and turn this tool back off, we'll see. And if you don't do things to record, have your non-fabric features assigned to record, it won't matter anyway, because I already have a 701 here. I already have a 700. So all I need to do is create the 702. So a lot of times it's just easier to go to the create window. I am in 200 scale. It's fine. Number. I have everything turned on. I apologize. I could have turned some of these off. 200. I want it to be 702. And then I can just stick it in there. And there it is. For our purposes, I'm going to select And again, like I say, this is just because of how we treat non-fabric with records. I'm going to select those two. Make sure I have what I want selected. Dean's built us a tool to, after the fact, assign it to record, but I can't be editing, so. Now it's all clean. It knows I'm grabbing 2 pieces of tax lot anno to assign to the record. Just going to run it. And this way, again, if I filter, then I will see those in my record.
Were we seeing right there that the rotation was off?
That's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
record. When I rotated it to match later, I didn't get it quite on.
Yeah, her record is not quite rotated correctly. Darn, you noticed.
Well, yeah, it's because that's,
Yeah, normally in our process, a lot of times after we build the lines, before we create polygons, we will do all our rotations, because then that way when we do create everything will be perfect. We don't have to worry about if we missed a point or the record wasn't selected. And it
do you
just
rotate
doesn't.
like each point to where it's supposed to be
So
typically?
So what we would normally do is we actually, after we finish all our traverse, so we just have lines, we
Mhm.
would try to place the best we could at that point.
Mhm.
And that way, before we create annotation, before we create polygons, points, or even a geometric piece for the record, it's already rotated.
So Gabe, I have to say one thing I'm annoyed at with how the hamburger works with Parcel Fabric is that you have to always explicitly select the record and explicitly select all features with the record.
Mhm.
And for the select to work, all of them have to be turned on and selectable and editable if you're going to move them. And sometimes you forget to have the record done and then it's not in the right place and you have to go fix that. And that I don't know why when you say select all features that it doesn't deal with that better, but I have to say I get caught by that. And if there's anything that I can miss, I will when I'm editing.
And to be honest, a lot of times, like I say, we usually will rotate when there's only lines to help avoid some of these problems.
Mhm.
But another thing I tend to do is I tend to leave my records turned off. And with that, you won't even notice it. It's just gone. And so that way, at least we can kind of ignore it for now that it's not perfect.
Okay. Another thing I have a question of is some of this annotation,
Mhm,
like we wouldn't put on our map because it's very like down, especially down by that curve.
mhm.
Can you select them and just delete them and not have it display, or do you always keep it there?
Oh, you can delete them. It's just annotation. In fact, we usually do like this curve data. We normally don't keep it unless there's plenty of room. And so you just go up here and you can hit delete and the annotation's gone.
Okay.
So the tool is converting the labels, and the request that I had from Donna and Christy was to move as much of that information into annotation and then allow folks to move and delete stuff. So
Which
I
is-
the tool tries to, and that comes from the label. So you can play with all that up front, decide what labels you want to bring across, and then it moves it in.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
better that way than having to actually type
Yeah.
them all in.
Yeah.
And so
So, yeah, I think, depending on how you have it set up, you can choose when I have tax lot line labels on, I might only want to show distance for, whichever scale you're on. In this case,
Yeah.
I'm 200. So if I want distance, you can decide above, below kind of thing. But anyway, I could just turn on the 200 distance. It wouldn't even turn on the bearing. And, I think you can kind of see there's a distance right there that they put on. There's a distance there. It will just create it that way instead of having to create all the pieces. Like say at Polk County, we keep a lot of annotation. That's not common for most counties.
So the
And
cool stuff is that tool It's just grabbing whatever's in the label for that particular, the label that you currently have turned on.
Yeah.
And we can
I
talk
hate
about
to
that offline.
I hate to say it, but I've got to make like a horse droppings and hit the trail. So, Christy, thanks for showing everybody this, and I'll check in with you guys, Gabe, and see how it all went.
Okay,
Thanks.
So then, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of to clean things up a little bit, work with just my record stuff again. So I'll go ahead and get rid of some of this other annotation, because generally we would place things ahead of time, like this, and then deal with the stuff that was already on the map. Sometimes I try to pre-look at the map and delete off things before I even create the annotation. It really just depends on what we're doing and what we need. But it's easy. Go ahead. It's easy to grab and use the move tool and move things as needed. In this case, where that bearing for some reason got flipped away, I don't like, I can select the one that it goes with, and I can steal the angle. And then when I click on it, just replace that. And now it's where I want it to be.
That
I
was
just-
cool.
Yeah. And then grab the right piece, move it where I want, continue that way. Like say, you can always delete things if you just want to select, you know, they don't have enough room for this bearing, you decide you can just delete it. So different ways to kind of move around annotation. I don't know how much time you want me to spend on this, but yeah, there's all of those things.
yeah, annotation is a big headache for Jeff and I, but
Annotation's always been my least favorite, even back in my GIS days, so.
But you're using this, you're using the annotation attributes as your primary tool for manipulating the characteristics of an annotation.
I just find this is usually the route I go to get to things. There's so many different ways to do things. You just have to find what works best for you. Might have to turn the snapping off.
yeah, hold on.
But anyway, I don't know how much time you want me to spend on that, but we
Yeah,
can manipulate it.
I can interject real quick. The only
Mhm.
problem I have with manually moving all this anno is I like to have everything offset evenly. Otherwise, over time, you're gonna have all these numbers, bearings, and distances from variable distances from the line. And to me, that kind of potentially could start looking sloppy, but
I don't disagree with you. This has always been Polk County's process. When I was at Marion, that's how we did it too. We did the follow feature and had the set offset, and that's how we worked.
yeah, and I'm all about that. It's hard for me to get away from that tool because I've used it so long and it's so clean.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I can't deny that. This is, like I say, Polk County, how we've always done it.
right.
For multiple reasons, partly also because we do so much stacking of annotation. Because when I go and turn this back off and we have that old annotation underneath, we try to keep our historic annotation as much as we can too. So if this used to be 120 instead of 1981, we'll put parentheses around it and we'll stack it up above it. So everything has always stayed manual here instead of having that uniform feel.
Right. And then following a curve, that's a whole topic in itself. I mean, just trying to, I don't know, it's been a struggle for something that should be pretty simple. It's
Yeah,
it's
and
tough.
I have to admit, it's just not something that we have played with enough in Polk County. I can't
Right,
speak on it a whole lot because it's just not part of what we tend to do here.
okay. We just gotta change our ways, trial by fire.
Well, or find things that do work. There's a lot of things that I've had to find new ways to do what I used to do, and it just comes with lots of time and playing. And
Yes,
I feel like one of the best examples of that is how we actually put this record into our map. Which, let me just scan, make sure I'm not missing anything.
So while she's
Um,
doing that, I will see the Marion County guys next week. And I can talk to them about potentially doing an annotation demo and recording it. So let's keep pursuing that. Christy, if that's what the guys at Marion do, let's see how they do it, because they're using Pro also.
yeah, and do you know, I assume they're also in the Fabric, probably.
I will find all that out next
Yeah.
week.
They-
I mean, the Tom Roth, the assessor, and one of the guys is going to be up at the GIS forum presenting. So we'll find out how far they really are.
switch back over.
And I know they also have a more normal amount of annotation. They just keep distances. They don't worry about the bearing. A lot more of that too. So it's probably a lot more similar to what you're used to seeing. And I also know that Marion County, at least when I was there, was very polygon based for their editing. Here, like I say, we're very line based. And so how we generally will work things in the map is more line based than polygon based. And that was my plan of what to show you as far as working it in, which would be the next thing I would probably focus on. If you guys are ready for that, or if you have more questions, or if you want to see more annotation, we can play with it, but it's more of the same.
Yeah, we are line based too, I think. We create our polygons out of lines, and I mean the annotation thing as a whole. This was good introduction for us for this piece, I think.
Okay. And there are tools for making arrows and everything too. Again, yeah, can look at those if you want, just let me know. But I wanted to make sure to show you kind of what I've found as far as trying to get back to more of a line base build in Fabric.
Yeah.
So one of the things when I get to this step, I do, because I find issues with having the old lines and the new lines and the old polygons and the new polygons. As long as you're in at least, is it 3-1, Dean, when they did reconstruct from seeds?
Yeah.
Yeah, so as long as you're in at least 3-1, you're able to take, I'm going to just select all the polygons. Make sure that's what I have selected. I'm going to run what's called shrink to seeds on my new, so this is because I still have shown the active, my new tax lots, I'm shrinking back to seeds. I'm now going to go back to show all of the tax lots. And my next step would be to select all the adjacent tax lots. So I'm holding shift to just select a whole bunch. I still have the move tool on. Apologies for that. Let's turn that off. Back to just select. So I'm going to hold my shift key and select all the adjacent tax lots.
And while she's doing that, Polk County has never liked any of the adjust tools as recommended by ESRI.
We've played with them, and even with playing, we still find that we cannot always get the expected results. So whether it's user error or not, I can't say, but we have not had a lot of success with them. So now that I have all the polygons that
To just be
surround,
stubborn cartographers. Sorry.
I'm going to go ahead and also shrink those to seed.
But this is a really cool way to do it. So I'm just
Mhm.
teasing Kristen.
Yeah, and the order matters on this. because now I still have my original 2 tax lots. So like if I select this one, you'll see it covers 702 and 701. My original 2 tax lots are still here. I'm going to select them after everything else is already shrunk to seed. That's, important to, stipulate that part of it. So if I select them and then I click this set historic, when I do this, because all these others are at seeds, it automatically is going to take all these lines that were related to the old tax lots and make those tax lot lines historic as well. So now when I try to select a line right here, I go to my attributes, I only have 1 tax lot line selected instead of 2 because the old one is now already created at historic. So I don't have to worry about that cleanup.
Sorry, so you selected all the new tax lots and then set to historic? Is that right?
I
Selected all the old tax lots.
well, there's kind of 3 steps, and 1, 2, you could kind of choose your order, but I usually am in show only active. So I go ahead and select my new record tax lots first to shrink to seeds.
Right,
And after I've done them, then I do all the adjacent
Right.
ones and shrink them to seeds. And it's important that all of those are shrunk to seeds before selecting your old tax lots and setting them to historic.
setting the old tax lots. Okay,
Yeah, so
So
if
her
I,
third step was to select the 2 old tax lots and assign them historic. Because now they're, you don't see them, they're still there, but they're in the historic pile. And you have a record that they used to exist in this location, but because you set it historic and your tax lots are tied to those polygons, all of that information got slid aside and you no longer have to mess with it.
so right now I just undid that last step. So my old tax lots are still regular current polygons right now. If I select this, we can see it's,
Okay, okay.
underneath it's the old one. We can see the attributes over here. It's an older thing. And if I went ahead and selected this way, we're also going to see right now there are 2 tax lot lines because there's the one I created and the one that was there already. So then if I clear this and I just select those polygons, so those are now selected, and then I set them historic. Now they took all those tax lot lines associated with them because they weren't shared by these anymore because they've already been shrunk to seeds and made them historic. So I only have my new tax lot lines for my boundary.
Okay,
So now I need to do my line cleanup. Obviously, depending, you make your different choices to keep it simple. I'm just going to make things match my new. And so up here, you can see it's kind of off. We're going to do that whole, select the line and edit vertices. I'm going to probably turn off some different selection just to make life a little easier right now. Okay. So now I've selected my tax lot line. I'm going to hit edit vertices, and that way then I can just snap this to here. Like I say, obviously we'd normally spend a lot of time making sure that's how we wanted to do things. Those are going to be intersects. I'm just going to leave them till later. This one here.
So you could use the Esri tools for adjust and all that to do this.
Correct.
But she is just making sure that she has it exactly how she wants it. And again, this is fitting with our standard workflow that we've done for many years
In Polk County.
in Polk.
Yeah,
Thank you, Christy.
yeah, because it's all just depends. All counties are different based off of just their needs, their time constraints, everything else. So on these ones, they're going to actually be intersects. And so I'm actually going to use the intersect tool. So that's also in the parcel workflows. And find the line intersection tool. It's fairly similar to ArcMap. I will grab my one tax lot line. I will grab my other tax lot line. It shows them in gray. And then when I zoom in for my last one, it shows this dashed because it has to extend, I believe. And then we click there. It should happen. And
what
now
happened to the Kogo attributes?
I did not hit the recalculate. So in this case, they should still be how they were. It looks like it adjusted the length of this line, but it still kept my bearing.
Okay.
So it calculated the break.
Yeah, good.
And then again, this is a Polk County thing. When I clear this, this line is now red. For us, what we do is we do that just to make sure that we have things, the line types calculated to parcel boundary or road. If it's not calculated, we make it big and ugly. And so what I'll show you is after I'm done, I'll take care of those line types. So then we'll obviously need to do this one. This one is an extend.
So this was the deal that in the domain, we said, go to default if you duplicate the line. So that's why it's doing it.
And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and select this right here from the attribute table right now, because I know I'm going to want to delete it. And I'm just going to go delete, and I'll just quickly take care of just that little piece. And then I believe this is my last one I need to do.
There's no topology anymore to check if we missed one, right? Like, how do we?
Topology still exists in ArcPro the way it did in ArcMap.
But not in Fabric.
It's
Yeah,
it's
It's still
there. Yeah, and it works the same way it did in ArcMap.
because we are so infinitely concerned about lines, we have created a separate topology tool so that you can select all of the line, you can select a map extent, and it actually copies that data set out to another data set, runs topology, and then lets you look at it. And the idea was that you can have some very tiny, tiny errors that running topology can cause. And I think Frank talked about that in the class. So we actually don't apply topology here, but in our QA/QC, we check for it. And that's another non-ORMAP tool that we could talk about.
So I think I've done them all. Next thing I would do just to kind of clean it up is I want to get rid of all those ugly red lines. I usually just quickly select this way because I know all of my tax lot lines, even if they were already calculated, they're all going to want the line type of parcel boundary. So because I have them all selected as a group and I have this selected here, so I'm looking at everything as a group. As you can see right here, it says that right now the line types are different values. Some of them know where they belong, some of them don't. If I hit the drop down and click parcel boundary and apply, now all of them are set to parcel boundary, so I don't have to go through and do a field calc. I don't have to go through and do them separately. They now all look clean.
And those were red because they didn't know which one they're supposed to be.
Yeah, we have things symbolized. So the line type was set to null, so it was this ugly red line.
You know, when you play with a line, mess with it in the domain, you can have it set to, if you've duplicated the line or split the line, you can have it set to default, and our default is unassigned. And that way we just always know that that line has been messed with. It does add another small step, but
No,
it's part of the workflow.
it's a good visual.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so as you can see, even right here, these lines, because they defaulted to parcel boundary originally, They are not roads right now, so I'm going to want to do the same thing for them. I want to make this only. And then I'm going to change my line type. Right now, they're parcel boundary, and I want them to be public road right away. But it's nice because I can do them all at once this way. And then I can just clear it. And now they're showing the kind of more of a brown color instead of the black. So I know that those are also cleaned up.
Now, because the one line is a tax code line, you would probably have to go and just check out that and make sure you snap the tax code line to your
Yeah.
line vertices.
Didn't know if you guys wanted to waste the time. The
I-
same thing with the map. If I turn my map on, I also have a map line here. So I'm going to have to fix all that because they are off at this point. As you can see, the tax code is going to need to be fixed there. But at this point, since I believe I got all my lines cleaned up correctly, I'm now ready to build my polygons and see if things work correctly. And one thing that's important to remember when doing this, you have to be zoomed out to a far enough extent that your entire polygon that's missing shows. Because when we go to reconstruct, if something's off the screen, the polygon won't build from seed.
And
So
that's
it's just
those got there because we did the shrink to seed, right?
correct. These are all of our shrink to seeds.
Okay.
So now I make sure that, yep, all my roads are showing all the way, my tax lots are showing all the way. And I'm going to make sure I use reconstruct from seed, not build. And kind of the thing to be careful with this tool is when you do reconstruct from seed, it doesn't necessarily know what lines it's supposed to go to. So if you have duplicate lines, if you have, just anything extra in there, it's not going to build the way you expect. This works specifically because we focus on a line-based build and only have one line, no duplicate lines. So I'm going to go ahead and hit reconstruct from seeds. I'm going to hope that all of my polygons come back, and they did. And
And if
what's
they didn't, you could just hit the left arrow and oops that out and find your errors, correct?
or if it didn't and it built part of them, I don't have to undo. I know exactly
Okay,
which area to target to look for where my line errors are. And then I can fix them and hit reconstruct from seeds again.
And then when you do the reconstruct, though, all the attributes are gonna be there, right?
Yes, the seed held on to them. And what's really nice is right now you can see the one that I'm looking at is 500. This was one of my adjacent lots. The created by lot or the record is still the old record. It's not my new one. It was created by Dean when we did our conversion back in January. Yet if I go to 701, which I just created, it shows that it's my new record that it was created by. And you can see it was, as inspector on
Yeah.
today. So that way,
far away.
yeah, that way, even though these polygons were affected by my record, they're not technically part of my record. And if I go back to show only active, you're only going to see your actual record. I do now have these two lines showing because of how I did the intersect tool. They got modified and put in my record. If I did not want that, I could manually select them and change them, whether I copied a record ID and put it in, or if I changed my active record to the original map record, I could always say, same thing, copy and paste in that record information if I was worried about them showing in my record.
So
But they
part of
were,
part of the issue with the clip and the merge tools that you have from ESRI is all of the neighboring tax lots that were affected by that transaction adopt that adopt that record name. And then you've got a big area when you may have only had one polygon that was assigned. So this is another reason, and I apologize, I teasing Christie about their process, but another reason why this works well for us is that we don't want to see all those extra, we have made the decision that we do not want to see all polygons associated with the record that were impacted. We just want to see the polygons that specifically were part of it.
which makes
And-
sense. Yeah,
And it's just, again, what I'm getting at here is we spent a long time figuring out the business rules to make sure it worked to meet our needs.
Yeah,
makes
It may
it's,
not be yours.
yeah, this is after hours and hours of trial and error on a lot of things among multiple people that we got here. Because it seemed to fit best for how our processes work.
so let me ask you this question. I mean, I appreciate all the time you spent with us, but on a normal process, how long would it take you to do this survey? What would the time expected for you to complete it?
Um,
And just to get,
it's,
obviously, but
yeah, it's hard because our process ends up being so broken up.
Mhm.
And like I say, usually we don't work it into the map. And like say at this point, I would then run topology, which,
And she'd produce a map. all
yeah,
that good stuff.
there's a lot of pieces that we do extra that others won't do because of all of our old processes that we have built in to help keep track of records, which now ESRI has a way to do it for us if we want. But we would then, you'll run, like say, we have our own version of topology tool. And, we run that, once everything is clean, you'd go back to your source. You would click on your version. And then go to the versioning tab. We would reconcile at this point, when you
But you could have-
reconcile.
You could have made your map before this part, right?
Yes, you can. When we reconcile, they have a version changes. On top of running topology, I always review this to see, okay, 3 records were affected by this. We updated 2 different records because we're on a map boundary, as well as we inserted the new record. That I just quickly checked to make sure all of this, the inserts are the new, the updates are the ones that I manipulated. Everything looks right. I did 3 new records, 9 were manipulated. If everything looks good there, the topology ran clean. At that point, I'd then post and it would go back into default. And there are different ways to set that up. You can even set it up. I think that your version gets deleted upon posting. I can't remember. That would be a question probably for Eric, but we chose to leave ours up until we manually choose to go into the manage versions and delete one. You can just delete like that.
So part of our process, because of our integration with assessment and tax, is this will get worked and the voucher process started with our appraisers. But until it gets processed, this may sit here. And so your question about how long, well, depends on what the heck the appraisers are doing. If they're all on vacation, it might be a little while before we bring it back in, because we don't want to bring it back into the full database, because the full database always needs to be matched with what's in the A&T system.
Yeah, which we don't have that same integration, so.
Yeah, I really don't feel the time is all that different now from ArcMap, now that we have gotten comfortable with the software and figured out what things work for us. I feel that the time spent is probably fairly similar to when we were in ArcMap. However, that being said, it took us, I mean, I've been working in it for a couple of years, somewhat heavy testing the last year. So it's taken us a while to get here, but I don't think it takes that much different time than it was in ArcMap.
And then
Yeah.
ultimately you have so much more information, historical data. and it's
Yeah.
much better ultimately, Beth. We get constantly asked about timelines, so.
Yeah.
So Gabe, I would say that as an unbiased outside observer, that Christy and Zach really started hitting this hard. Zach hitting it hard, starting like in July, and then Christy and Zach saying, okay, as a side project from all the other things they're doing, really looking at the steps one by one and documenting what has to buttons to press, really started like in October. And then we said, go. And we had a glitch in there in that we tried to adopt 3.2. I converted all the tools, Zach was testing, converted all the processes, and then went, oh my God, it's not working, and then rolled it all back. So there was a little bit of a hiccup there. Christy, I don't know. You've got Zach's process that he documented. Now you guys have edited. I don't know if you've shared that with Gabe and I just missed it, and Jeff.
No, because yeah, it's essentially our subdivision process, but it includes all of our custom tools, and also we build any plats and lots feature layer too.
And I'm not sure, given where you guys are at in your integration with your existing system, I probably wouldn't do it. But Christy, if you could share that with them, just so they get an idea of the format of what Zach and you have come up with, just to say, this is how we do. And that really, I kind of felt that was the jump to get us over with, how did we do that? And what's the best way? We had it written down, and I think you and Zach just did such a nice job making that part happen.
We do. We've probably tweaked some things. Like I say, we found we generally finish building all our lines and rotate before we build any polygons now, and I don't think that's quite the steps in the workflow that we had built. So we, kind of manually tweaked some things since it was built. But yeah, it's been a good document. And even as we work on lot line adjustments and other things, instead, we don't necessarily have documentation built for all the workflows. A lot of times we kind of returned it for kind of our basic thing and just go, yeah, we can skip these steps because it's a lot simpler than a.
Yeah, and I think
Wow.
that's what Jeff and I need. To just have a starting point and outline and understanding that, as we get through it, we will also adjust to how things, and we still do, even
Yeah,
a
and
year later.
it only works through creating the record. It does not work through adjusting it back into the rest of the fabric. Because again, that's stuff that only in the last few months we've been figuring out.
Okay.
That's the process.
Simple.
So, guys, what I'll do is I'll hit stop recording. I have no idea where, like I say, it may take me a few days to find out and get this so it's loaded and you can look at it. And Christy, thank you so much for all the time preparing in today. Why don't we guys take a look at this? We'll talk about it a bit more. And again, on May 2nd, when we have our ORMAP technical meeting, I'm going to bring up this conversation and this process to see if ORMAP will help pay for it. Because obviously it's a hit on the cartographers who are sharing and preparing, but we'll see if we can make something happen, because I assume this is valuable, Gabe and Jeff.
Very valuable. I mean, I think, yeah, Jeff agrees.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very valuable. I mean, yes, without a doubt.
Cool.
It's been great. So I really appreciate the time and the effort put in. You didn't have to do any of this. So thank you.
Oh, I figured I'd mostly just wait and see what questions came, because we all have different focuses, and I know Polk County has a lot of custom built things to keep going. Like I said, our decades old process that most counties aren't going to care about. So
yeah, but it's really, the more I've said this to Dean, the more exposure Jeff and I have, the more we get and the more we get into it, the more we're going to be able to understand what we're doing.
yeah.
So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and it's stages.
Yeah.
Great, guys. Well, thank you. I'm going to stop the recording, and obviously I can't run away because I'm running the meeting. So I do have to be somewhere at 11.
Okay. Well, we appreciate it, and we will see you guys soon, I'm sure.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Let me know if you have any questions.